Hey everyone, welcome back to another OKestWeekly recap where we cover all things handheld gaming. This week we're on the other side of an avalanche of ROG Ally info as the pre-orders went live and the media embargo was lifted for the performance of the device. We saw some interesting benchmarks for the Ally versus the 7840U that we're going to take a look at. We'll also cover production updates for the Loki Max, as well as updates for other 7840U devices coming up. All updates or no updates, we'll cover every brand this week. If you enjoy these videos, do the OKS thing and boop that like button. And if you're new here to the channel, subscribe down below. Alright, let's dive into it. So the ROG Ally has now officially launched and we've been treated to numerous reviews, benchmarks, and gameplay footage. Now that we have the benchmarks and gameplay tests, we can take a look to see how the ROG Ally stacks up against the competition. So far, there's only been one video that I've come across that compares the Z1 Extreme with the 7840U, and the 7840U is what we're expecting to power this next generation of handhelds. That video was from the Fox, who compares the Z1 Extreme with the 7840U, 6800U, and the Steam Deck. For the 6800U, he's using a 32GB WinMax 2, and then for the 7840, he's got the refreshed WinMax 2 with 32GB of RAM. The results were pretty interesting. We didn't actually see that low TDP efficiency that we were expecting, and in the results, the 7840U seemed to have the advantage the majority of the time. I'm not going to show you all of the results, but I will show you a few. If you want to see the full results, you'll need to go visit his video and watch the full video, preferably after you finish the weekly recap, but we'll take a look at a couple of the games, and then afterwards I'll show you some screenshots from some ETA Prime videos for the A1 Pro and the ROG Ally. It seems to show a similar picture there. So the first game we're going to look at is Cyberpunk 2077 running at 800p. So this is at 10 watt TDP. As you can see, the Steam Deck is the low TDP champ still. It's got a good gap ahead of everyone else. Then we've got the 7840U, and the Z1 Extreme is very similar to the 6800U here, which is a little surprising. I thought with the custom voltage and whatnot that we would have scores that were a little bit more in line with the Steam Deck, maybe not beating it, but closer. But here it's really not showing that, at least not now. Moving up to 15 watts seems to change the story a little bit. So if we look at the 7840U and the Z1 Extreme, we can see that now they're at the top and they have a pretty good lead on the other two devices. We have the 6800 that's ahead of the Steam Deck, and the Steam Deck consistently will be at the bottom at 15 watts. Moving up to 20 watt, we see the Z1 Extreme actually take first place. This was the only game that this happened. Usually it was in second place. So it passes the 7840U, and then we have the 6800 that seems to lag behind, and the Steam Deck is of course at 15 watts, so that one's not going to be getting any improvements. And now that we move up to 25 watt, we can see that the gap actually increases between the Z1 Extreme and the 7840U. So this was a bit of an anomaly compared to the other tests because we actually found the opposite to happen on most other games, where the Z1 Extreme would be in second place, but it would be about the same gap that we see here behind the 7840U. So it's a little strange, not sure if this game is just better optimized for the Z1 or what's going on. To demonstrate my point, here's the results at 25 watt for Horizon Zero Dawn. So here we see the 7840U again have a bit of a gap on the Z1 Extreme, but strangely enough here the Z1 Extreme is almost neck and neck with the 6800, which really you would think that it would have a gap. So I'm wondering if we have some drivers that need to be updated or what's going on, because it doesn't seem to be performing the way we would be expecting it to perform. And the last benchmark I'll show you from that video is God of War. So here at 25 watt you can see that the gap is a little bit smaller between the Z1 Extreme and the 7840U, but there is a consistent theme that the 7840U in these benches seem to be coming out ahead, except for Cyberpunk. There was many other games covered and a lot more information you can get from the Fox's video, so I'll leave that video in the description and give that a watch after you're finished this video. So for this next section, it's a little hard to showcase. I can show you a couple screenshots, but I don't take video footage from other content creators unless it's a brand. So you're going to need to watch his videos if you want to see more information, but I can at least describe it to you and show you some screenshots. First up is Cyberpunk 2077 running at 15 watt on the ROG Ally. Now we don't know what the FSR is set to, we just know that it's at 1080p low, so we can't get an exact comparison between the two. But he does describe that it's just under 60. It's not quite locked, but it's pretty close. And then when we move over to the AOKZOE A1 Pro, we actually get very similar results. So he has it set at 1200p low settings. We don't know what the FSR is set at, but just like the other one, he says it's very close to 60, just under. And if you want to lock 60, you need to up the TDP. Moving up to 30 watts for the ROG Ally, we get frame rates kind of all over the place. It seems that the average he said was somewhere in the mid 60s, high 60s. and this is running also at 1080p low. And then for the AOKZOE A1 Pro, we have it set to 28 watts, and very similar, it's in the mid 60s, high 60s at 1200p low settings. So the AOKZOE A1 Pro and the Z1 Extreme are getting very similar results, with the AOKZOE at 2 watts less TDP and at 1200p resolution. So something seems a little strange here. The 7840U seems to be outperforming the Z1 Extreme. Now, I don't know if this is going to be remedied with some driver updates or what's going to happen with that. We're going to have to wait to see what comes of it. I mean, they could also have driver updates for the 7840U that also boost the performance there. So anyway, I'll be watching this and I'll keep you guys up to speed as I learn more. And when I get the two devices, I'm getting the AOKZOE A2 and I'll also be getting the ROG Ally. I'll do my own benchmarks as well and see how they pit against each other at launch. So now that we've got some more information on the ROG Ally, what do you guys think of it? Is it something that lived up to your expectations? Did it fall short? Did it exceed them? Let's talk about it in the comment section. And that's going to wrap it up for the ROG Ally this week. Let's move on to the next section. This week for Steam Deck, we've got a few software updates. Now note that I did record this video early due to a trip that I'm going on, so I have only up till the 17th of May. But before we go into the updates, there is one other piece of news. So it seems that Valve is being sued by Immersion over the Steam Deck's Rumble feature. Immersion is a company that has a ton of patents for Rumble technology. They seem to be a patent troll. They've basically had lawsuits with Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, Fitbit, Apple, Google, Motorola. It seems that anyone that uses Rumble technology is targeted by Immersion at some point. So what most likely will happen, that's happened with many others, is they end up licensing the technology from Immersion, so we can expect that to probably be the result here, but we'll see what happens. Moving over to software updates, both of the updates that I have are related to desktop mode. So the first one was on the 15th, and that one seems to add a feature for pasting images into game notes. Aside from that, it's mostly bug fixes. And then the next update on the 16th adds a minimize and maximize button to the standalone browser, and also has a bunch of bug fixes. I'll leave the link in the video description if you want to check the full changelog. And I have one last update for the Steam Deck. So we actually are getting a screen replacement from a company called FX Technology. So they're going to be releasing a 1200p screen that matches the specs of the Steam Deck, like 60 Hz refresh rate. It has 400 nits screen brightness, and it also has an anti-glare coating, just like the high-end Steam Deck model. Aside from the higher resolution, one thing that kind of shines on it is the RGB coverage. So it has 74% Adobe RGB coverage compared to the original Steam Deck screen, which is at 45%. So what do you think of this modification? Is this something that you're going to look into doing, or is this something you're going to pass on? Let's talk about it in the comments. And that's going to do it for the Steam Deck this week. Let's move on to the next section. For AOKZOE this week, I have a couple updates for the A1 Pro. I was speaking to one of the staff about the A1 Pro and how the RAM is clocked at 6400 megahertz. I found out that the RAM is actually the 7500 megahertz RAM in there, but it's just been downclocked. So it's advertised and it's going to default with 6400 megahertz, but they also said that users are going to be able to adjust it. So if users are willing to try it out and accept that there may be bugs and kind of be responsible for sorting that out, then it'll be something that users can request to be able to adjust. So I'm not sure if that means that the BIOS will be unlocked to a certain extent, or if they're going to be offering another version of the BIOS for people that request it. So for those that like to tinker with the settings and try to optimize to get the best out of the device, this should be a really good update. So I'll keep you guys up to speed as I learn more. One question that I've been seeing around the AOKZOE Discord server is how much VRAM the 64GB model is supposed to have. So when I was talking to AOKZOE, they said that currently it looks like it's going to have 8GB of VRAM, but they're looking at adjusting it to up to 12GB of VRAM, but they're going to see after some testing to see how it goes. So hopefully it's going to be 12GB. I know this is most games, it's not going to make a major difference, but we have seen some games that tend to stutter when the VRAM is set lower. The A1 Pro Indiegogo is still live, so if you are interested in this, check it out. I'll leave a link in the video description. And that's all I've got for AOKZOE updates this week. Let's move on to the next section. For OneXPlayer this week, it was a bit of a quiet week. We haven't heard anything for the OneXFly yet. Hopefully we'll get some information soon. I know that that's supposed to be just around the corner for when we get a bit more information on the product, maybe what chip it's going to use. Aside from that, we have a sale next week that's going to be coming up on Monday. I don't have the specific information for that, but I'll leave a link in the video description for their store page so that you can check it out if you're in the market for a OneXPlayer. So that's the short and sweet update for OneXPlayer this week. Let's move on to the next section. This week for AYN, we got a few updates for the Loki series. First of all, we got some information for the Loki Mini Pro as well as the Loki Zero. So it sounds like they plan to send out 100 units by the end of June, and then mass shipping will begin in July. They said they're not planning to cancel any more SKUs and that they're committed to get these devices out to the buyers. Moving over to the Loki and the Loki Max, they had their first test for the shell mold this last Friday on May 12th, and it looks like the test went pretty well. There was a couple small things that they want to refine, but it seems that they're going to be moving forward with it. When asked for a specific shipping date, they said that on the 23rd of May they're going to be sending out the review units, and that they plan to send the first batch of 100 units by the end of May and the beginning of June. After that, they plan to send another batch of about 1,000 units. One other thing to note is that the skins that they planned for the Loki and Loki Max have been cancelled. They weren't able to get these to work because of the curved surface, and they tried to cut it with multi-angles, but it wasn't working out very well. There were many other questions that were answered in the Q&A. You can either pause the video here to take a look on the video, or you can visit their Discord. I've left a link in the video description with a link to the post. And that's going to wrap it up for AYN this week. Let's move on to the next section. For AYANEO this week, we had a couple of updates. Our first one is that the Neo 2S and the Geek 1S campaign is going to be going live on May 25th. I don't have any more information on pricing, but if you're interested in this product, I'll leave a link in the video description for the Indiegogo where you can sign up for email notifications. One other update for AYANEO is for the Neo 2 and Geek, where we can upgrade the board to the 7840. So that we did get a rough date. It sounds like it's going to be 3 months after the Neo 2S and Geek 1S campaign. Whether that's 3 months from the start of the campaign or 3 months from the end of it, I'm not totally sure, but we'll have to wait to hear more information. And that's all I've got for AYANEO this week. Let's move on to the next section. This week for GPD, the only updates I have is for the GPD Win Max 2 refresh, the one with the 7840U, and most of this information overlaps with the ROG Ally section that I already covered. So we've seen benchmarks come out for the Win Max 2, the refreshed version, and it seems to be performing very well. With the current drivers available today, it seems that the Win Max 2 refresh is outperforming the ROG Ally in the tests that the Fox had done. You can check out his video in the video description, or you can jump back to the ROG Ally section if you just want a sneak peek at what he had covered. So if you're interested in a larger handheld that could also work as a small laptop, you may want to check this one out. It seems like it's going to be a really good device. I'll leave a link in the video description to their Indiegogo. Aside from that, I don't have any updates for GPD, so let's move on to the next section. This week for software updates, I wanted to give an update on the Xbox and Activision Blizzard acquisition. Last time I gave an update that the UK regulatory body, the CMA, had blocked the deal. We weren't sure how it was going to affect the FTC and the EU regulators. We did get an update from the EU that they are going to allow the deal to go through, but they did have concerns, just like the CMA did, for cloud gaming. What they've been asking for is that other cloud gaming services be able to access Activision Blizzard games for the foreseeable future, and that users be able to play them on any device and any operating system that they choose to. Microsoft has two major steps to go through yet. They need to get through the FTC, so we'll have to see what the FTC, that's the US regulatory body, to see what they say. And they still need to figure out what they're going to do with the CMA, whether that's settling in court or whether they're able to, I guess, find some common ground on how to satisfy the CMA's requirements and be able to move forward with the deal. So I'll keep watching this and keep you guys up to speed. This is probably the biggest acquisition we've seen, so it's just an interesting thing to follow. Okay, that's it for software updates. Let's move on to game sales. For this week's game deals, let's head over to deals.gg to start us off. Looking at our new deals, we have Fallout 3 for $4.99, Hogwarts Legacy for $48.34, Hi-Fi Rush for $21.67, Ghostwire Tokyo for $17.85, and we've got Doom for only $3.40, Fallout 4 for $4.25, and Wolfenstein Old Blood for $3.40. So there's a number of solid titles here for super cheap, so you may want to check some of these out. I recommend Wolfenstein, Doom, and Fallout for sure. Moving over to best deals, we see a lot of the titles carry over, but we have a couple other ones added. We have Watch Dogs 2 for $6.45, we have Far Cry 4 for $5.16, and Ori and the Will of the Wisps for $5.99. Moving over to historical lows, we see a number of the same games from last week, so if you didn't get a chance to pick up any of the games from Ubisoft, this might be a good chance to get them. For the free games this week, now this wasn't confirmed before I finished recording, but it looks like Death Stranding is likely going to be the Epic Games free game. Metro Last Light is going to be free on Steam, and Bloody Hell will be free on GOG. Let's move over to Steam now. So we have a number of games that are carrying over from last week, so perhaps it just hasn't updated yet by the time I was recording, but Crusader Kings 3 is 50% off, Far Cry 6 75% off. There's a major sale on FIFA 23 and NBA 2K23. And then some games that are new this week, we have Battlefield 2042 for 75% off. We have Days Gone for 67% off. Need for Speed Unbound for 70% off. And It Takes Two for 50% off. If you haven't played It Takes Two, it's a great game to play with a partner, or if you have kids, I would recommend checking it out if you're looking for a good couch co-op game. And that's going to do it for this week's recap. Thanks for watching.